Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Juneteenth. Thank you for joining us for Tipsy Testing. It is Inflectra's weekly virtual happy hour. We use Tipsy Testing as our opportunity to meet new speakers and introduce new speakers to you guys, as well as talk about, future of software testing, what's good and what's bad in being a tester, or how we do better in testing. And we talk about just life in general. Let me introduce our guests today. So he is a tester with, I hear, 25 years of QA experience. He's also a very famous international keynote speaker. I'm happy to present Damian Synadinos. What we think would be the trend for QA or in QA for 2020 or even 2021, if we have any kind of idea of it, since we've been locked in our houses.
I think that with the current state of the global pandemic and the current state of the world, I think that perhaps customer focus might be a trend. It seems kind of soft and touchy-feely, but I think that people might be more interested to focus on the customers and the empathy and the feelings and emotions of their customers, and less focus on the shiny new technology.
Yep.
Understanding how your customers feel, I think, is going to be very, very important going forward. And considering that, designing, planning your software solutions to consider how people feel might be all the difference.
Yeah, I also think another aspect of QA that's going to be very important is communication skills. Some people really are good at text spaces. Some people are awful. They type something and they go, oh, it's a typo, and stuff like that. And it gets very confusing. And so having the maturity to sort of start up Google, a video conference, but not everyone wants to do that. You're busy. So I think people having really good communication skills is going to become a very important part of QA and development. I mean, anyone involved with quality, being able to communicate potentially better in a written form.
Yeah, this actually dovetails really well into the question that we got about being a better tester, which was basically about the common misconceptions and while you're trying to communicate as a tester on a team.
And I think that one of the common misunderstandings that happens in test teams is trying to solve a customer's problem before you truly understand the problem. If you don't sufficiently adequately understand the problem that you're trying to solve, how can you possibly offer a solution that's anything greater than a Band-Aid, a kludge, a temporary solution?
That's interesting you mentioned that, because it's not just the actual engineering side. In our customer support team, we had a situation where a client raised the ticket because something wasn't working the way they wanted. And our natural inclination as developers and even testers is to try and find what is the root cause of that not working. The client didn't care. They just wanted it to work as soon as possible. And so we started through all these questions and getting data back and trying to figure out why the system wasn't working. Instead, there was a simple workaround which would have got them moving. And eventually we jumped in and went, you know what, forget all that stuff. Just click these 5 buttons, it's going to work. We will have no idea why. It'll probably never happen again. And we'll never be any wiser. The system won't be any better, but the customer's moving. And sometimes you have to understand the customer doesn't care about your system. They care about doing their job that moment.
Sometimes I think about them on an X, Y, and Z axis, the X axis being wants, the Y axis being needs, and the Z axis being expectations. Solving for all 3 of those things, or considering all the wants, needs, and expectations, can, I think, really help you hone in on a proper solution.
A follow-up to that question was if you guys had any advice for people who are trying to address these miscommunications, what would be like 3 go-to things to consider?
Finding the why, I think, is terribly important. Understanding the reasons or purpose or goals that you do something can help you better understand what to do and then how to do it.
In a previous career before Inflectra, I was actually a management consultant. One of the things I learned about management consulting was, and I think these are very appropriate, one is pause. You always want to answer right away, and that's usually the worst thing. So pause before you send an email at night, draft it, save it, don't send it. The other thing is what I call reflection. And in consulting, this was the biggest trick I learned in consulting, was when the client says something like, this needs to happen, or the system needs to do this, you always want to say, and you look very wise, so what I'm hearing you saying is, and you repeat back what they said. It's amazing when you do that what they think they said isn't what they actually said. That was the first thing I learned in management consulting, and that was what I think separated consultants out from everyone else, was just the ability to do that almost religiously and incredibly. And actually, in the software development world, if you're working, asynchronously, what we've made everyone do now is when we write, like if I'm working a user story, I write the user story. We have the QA person, if I'm the dev, the QA person has to read the user story and then rewrite it. And then usually a third person rewrites it. And at that point, only then do we truly believe we really have the user story and the requirement. Until then, it's never right.
How much of your quote unquote building better software translated mostly intact to the building better people side of things?
A more specific answer might be in software, I guess I'm trying to find that which is desired and that which is undesired, and then report those things to others so that they might act on it, they can address it and potentially act on the undesired and address those undesired things, make them desired, and therefore make better software. That same sentence could be said for humans. I might be looking at people and talking to them and working with them to find out what gaps or holes or inefficiencies do they have. Maybe they're not as empathetic as they could be, or they're not a good communicator. So same way, you're finding the undesirable bugs, bringing them to light so that they can be addressed. You're finding undesirable things in humans, bringing them to light so they might address them.
If you look at it from the reverse perspective, if ever you look at a product or a system that's bad quality, you look at the team that built it, they're having a horrible time. The quality of life is minuscule. So I think to make better people is making better software, and vice versa. You can't make good software with a team that you're crushing.
As a speaker, where do you draw inspiration from? What is your process for picking a topic and bringing these topics to life?
On a session talk, what I'm usually looking for is something that's slightly different. It's something you can apply. It's also something that may not be covered. So I think I said in the last week's Tipsy testing, I mentioned that I did a bunch of API talks, not because I'm necessarily all that skilled in API testing, but it wasn't being covered much. You can also ask the program sponsors, and they're usually pretty open with you because they want to put together a good program. They don't want 100 people all submitting the same talk that they have to reject.
Most of my talks and content and blog posts and everything I produce it starts with experience. I guess the short answer is experience, which leads to interest, which leads to research and investigation, which leads to talk, but not always. So of all these different experiences, the ones that are usually frustrating or awesome, some of those are interesting to me. And if something is interesting to me, then I might want to investigate it and research it and learn more about this interesting thing since it's interesting to me. So that's kind of how I learn. So that's kind of how I get inspired, just by being aware of my experiences every single day and looking inward and saying, what's interesting and exciting to me? Will it be interesting and exciting to others as well? And my process of taking that idea and making it a stage-ready talk is a mess. It works for me. I speak with others. I look up words and definitions. I look up the etymology and origins of words. I look up synonyms and antonyms. I look up antonyms of ideas, not just words. And what's the contrasting idea? I talk to people outside of my context bubble, so I talk to sounding boards and echo chambers to get two different types of opinions. And then I take all these notes, it becomes this unwieldy Word document until it becomes too big and unwieldy, and I slim it down and create a new Word document that has just the key points. And eventually that turns into a slide deck, and eventually that will turn into a talk.
Now, let's talk about something we're going to do next week. So Adam and Damian both know the two gentlemen who are going to be joining us next Friday at 2 p.m. because they're from Netherlands. And so the two gentlemen are Bart and
Hybe
Sheets. Thank you for everyone who was here with us today. Have a great weekend, you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone.
Yes, be safe. Bye.